Thank you, everyone. My name's Alyson Genovese. I'm with the Global Reporting Initiative. I'm the head of U.S. and head of corporate and stakeholder relations here in the U.S. and Canada. My team is largely based in Amsterdam, and we have offices all over the world. So while I certainly represent the North American perspective, I will certainly try to be mindful of the larger global context. So I was asked to talk about sustainability reporting in general. Are there representatives of organizations in the room that do issue annual sustainability reports? Excellent. Okay, so we have a couple. So companies and other organizations issue sustainability reports because there's the expectation of disclosing to their key stakeholders financial and non-financial data around their social, economic, environmental, and human impacts on our world. This is done sometimes in concert with annual financial disclosure, sometimes done separately. We see more that it's done separately. And it's about performance-based. So it is both reflecting on past activities as well as looking towards the future. It also reports, it's important to think about them not as a static end document, but that a tool as part of continuous improvement for corporations and others. Oops, sorry, went a little bit too fast. So why do companies report on their sustainability activities? What we saw this has been around for about 20 years. What we saw originally, and why many organizations come to sustainability reporting, is because they want to mitigate risk. They want to understand and measure their risk, and they will also want to look at from a regulatory standpoint in terms of disclosure. But what we see is over time is that there's a myriad of reasons why companies and other organizations report on their sustainability activities. Much of it still remains in the risk mitigation standpoint, but we also see that companies and others are looking at it from a proactive, opportunistic standpoint, such as recruiting and retaining key talent, attracting new investment opportunities, from identifying R&D opportunities, market place, competitive advantage. And so you see that when organizations start to manage their sustainability impacts, that they can look at it both reactively as well as proactively. What is really in the value of sustainability reporting is that ensuring that companies are transparent, ensuring that companies are considering a range of issues that are impacting their company, and in terms of the risks and opportunities that they face. And we believe, as well as I believe that there's a growing understanding, is that this increased transparency allows greater trust in the organization and allows for better conversations among stakeholders, that they have the information they need in order to interact better and more effectively with this organization. So who's reporting? So 93% of the Global 250 issue sustainability reports. We just passed a pretty important milestone in that the GRI manages a sustainability disclosure database, where it's a free database that organizations upload their sustainability report to every year. And it's at sustainability reporting. I can get folks the URL, but it's on our website. And this is globally, we have 30,000 reports now that you can sort by year, you can sort by sector, you can sort by type of report that is issued, and what we see here is a tremendous growth year over year. About 8,000 organizations are represented in that set. Here in the US, we're seeing a tremendous growth of sustainability reporting. In 2011, there were 25% of the S&P 500 issued sustainability reports. Last year, it was 75%, and we expect that number to grow. What's not listed here is also the depth of reporting is becoming much more effective and much more credible. And we're seeing certainly a reaction from the investment community as well, is that here in U.S., that 1 in every $6 is on assets under management have socially responsible investing metrics tied into those. So the GRI, we are a global organization based from Amsterdam. We have offices, as I said, around the globe, and what we are aimed to do is create an environment where sustainability is important to the decision-making process of every organization. We want to empower the decision makers, the stakeholders, with accurate, timely, thorough, and thoughtful information in order for them to make decisions on who that they should be working with, who that they should be supporting, and then allowing them to have that information in order to make better decisions. We believe that this creates change, that this creates trust, and that every organization should make decisions both inclusive of how it impacts them as an organization, but also how it impacts the larger public interest. The sustainability reporting standards is probably how most people know the GRI, is we provide a global standard for companies and other organizations to report on their sustainability activities. It is a thorough process of materiality, I'll talk about in a second, and stakeholder engagement. And it allows companies to go through a standardized process to report on their impacts, their activities, their goals, and their policies and procedures. We believe, to your point earlier, that having a single global standard allows people to share the same language, to use the same language, to compare and contrast against other industries, against other partners, so that when we see multi-sector partnerships develop, that everyone is as understanding the measurements and how we can track and evaluate impact. We are not the only standard. There are others globally. There's an integrated reporting one, and the CDP issues one. 78% of companies that report use the GRI standard, and so you have all this information, so I won't repeat it. The standard that we have currently is deeply focused on materiality and focused on how a company can evaluate what topics or sustainability-related topics are of most concern to them, and that they have the most opportunity to impact. So when you think about a company that might be like a transportation company, that they have, they go through the process of determining their materiality, they may decide that it may come out that road safety is a big issue for them. Certainly carbon emissions and drivers, but they're not operating they're not an extractive, they're not operating in areas of conflict. And so that area of reporting is not material to them. And historically, companies had to go through every single sector, and this allows to have a much tighter report, a much more accurate reflection of the company's impact within the larger environment, and a much more robust conversation. So what we also do is, because there are multiple frameworks out there and multiple tools that companies need to use, is we make sure that they're all talking together. So we have relationships with CDP, with UN Global Compact, with IIRC, to make sure that there's alignment. There are standard disclosures on the left, specific disclosures on the right. We'll get you these slides, so I won't walk through them, but the general disclosures are disclosures that apply to any organization: governance, ethics, and the specific look at more specific aspects based on the materiality, as I just shared, and the performance indicators. So the GRI, we also provide supports and services to organizations that are reporting, as well as the community that, of NGOs and foundations, investors, capital markets, governments that are the surrounding organizations that have a vested interest in reporting. So we have an organizational stakeholder program, which is like our membership program. We have conference and all of that, and as well as much of this information is available for free on our website because we do issue it as a public good. So really what we want to look at today is what are the trends in sustainability reporting. So what we see is that there's a growth globally of regulations from governments and capital markets on disclosure. It does not, there are more than 30, there are more than 30 governments that have specific language that require companies that operate within their footprint to disclose on sustainability data. There's a growing interest in capital markets that in order to be a public company and list with them, you need to report on your sustainability activities. That's a big area that we're doing a lot more work on, and we'll talk in a second about the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and that's a big part of that. Also see a growth, not so much here in the US, but globally of integrated reporting. So having one single disclosure on both your sustainability and your financial impacts. It depends largely on the industry that you're in and your footprint, as well as the regulatory requirements of the, where you're located. Assured reports is something that we're talking a lot more about. Assurance is, for sustainability reports, what auditing is for financial statements. So whether or not a company reports is one thing, whether or not they issue an assured report is another. So that is not generally required globally, and we have about, of the reports that we see in our database, about a third to half are assured. Typically, they tend to be assured in the environmental space, and less so on the social impact side. That is something that I think comes up time and again on whether or not that should be a requirement to issue an assured report. That has not been something that we're seeing a lot of action on, but it's something that we're seeing a lot of conversation on. It'd be interesting to hear the perspective of the reporters here in the audience. As I spoke about, a tremendous amount of interest from the investor community around mitigating risk. At the SEC here in the US actually issued a statement that non-disclosure of climate impacts, I want to make sure I get the language right, that non-disclosure represents that that's something that you need to disclose as part of your financial annual reporting because it has such a material risk to the company. There's a one of the things that's interesting perhaps for this conversation is this rise of sustainability reporting outside the private sector. So you hear me say, well, companies do this, well, and other organizations. We're seeing a tremendous growth of municipalities issuing sustainability reports, of hospital systems issuing sustainability reports, NGOs. And what that does is it's particularly interesting here when you think about so the City of Atlanta issues a sustainability report, a G4 report. Coca-Cola, UPS, in Atlanta, they are issuing a report using the same framework. To be able to have those organizations collectively sit down and have a conversation becomes much more effective when they're using the same reporting tools. The data that they might measure is different because their inputs are different into that framework, but at least they're able to share information and read each other's reports with an eye of accuracy. We're also seeing a diversification of how organizations are communicating these results. So for many years, and I still hear it every day, that companies say, well, we issued the sustainability report and no one's reading it. It's 100 pages. And so part of this idea of moving beyond reports is that the sustainability report is a reference tool. It is a starting point for a conversation, but it does not preclude you from needing to talk to your stakeholders in ways that they're used to working with you. So we'll see lots more interactive websites, lots more use of the sustainability report in shareholders, quarterly updates and things of that nature. And so there is this kind of growing maturity around the report itself and what it can and can't do for you, and how you can then use those data to report, to communicate to your stakeholders. So one of the things I was asked to talk about, and these are my last two slides, is around the Sustainable Development Goals. Are folks familiar with them? Okay, good. So these are huge, and these are real, and they're really going to, I think, change the conversation for companies around their expectations and their ability to demonstrate impact on global issues. And companies don't know what to do with them. And so I think they're waiting. And one of the things that we saw as GRI is to recognize that there's a lot of work to be done to support and educate private sector about their impacts. And also, as we have 30,000 reports in our database, we see the data that they're reporting, and we see that the impacts that they're already making. And so part of our role as the GRI is to help translate the global goals into a larger context for companies to be able to understand their place in that world. So there's two places that we as GRI see, and one is this, it's 12, it's actually 12.6, which states that member states are encouraged to require sustainability reporting for companies that do business in their local market. And so what we want to do is make sure that companies understand what those requirements are. And so we developed the 12.6 tracker. And so we, as an organization, feel as though that we can help, and this is all available for free online, and it's live. You can look at, you can go into a country and look at what are the regulations and around reporting, and then also start to map some trends around that for companies. And so we also see as the Sustainable Development Goals mature and people start to act around them, that this area, which is quite live right now, but yet quite simple, that this will become a much more robust source of data around sustainability reporting. Oops, and sorry. My final is that we worked with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the UN Global Compact to develop what's called the SDG Compass. And I have some flyers that I can leave, as well as this is also sdgcompass.org, and you can go on it. And it does two things. It's a guide for business to get involved in the SDGs. So it helps, from a planning purpose, walk a company through taking their existing strategies, goals, and activities, and then map them against the current SDGs, as well as look at, okay, so then how can you think differently about what you're doing? How can you talk differently about your doing? How can you report differently about your doing? The other piece is that what we wanted to really do is make sure that companies didn't see the SDGs as just one more place that they had to report and be one more burden on from a external reporting standpoint. So we mapped the GRI and other reporting frameworks against the SDGs so that there's a clear line of connection. So you don't necessarily need to report against this. Starting on January 1st, our database will include the SDGs in the data and so we'll start tracking that for companies who will start this year, maybe in their sustainability reports talking about the SDGs, but we won't see real in earnest until the 2016 reports come out. So, thank you.
I want to thank
Back
you.
to you.
Yes,
Okay.
Alyson, that was wonderful. I think you've shown that when you have a quality product, which has a core component of transparency, you get buy-in, and buy-in gets you success.